Citizens United is breaking up corporate dominance of elections. For Liberty News Network, I'm Tom Eddlem. With the 2012 political season heating up, many people are calling for a ban on the super PACs created in the wake of the 2009 Supreme Court Citizens United decision. A few on the left have even called for a constitutional amendment to ban corporations from making political advertisements for fear that corporations have come to dominate elections in the United States. In one sense, they're right, but it's not the super PACs. The corporations that have been dominating the public debate for decades are the media empires. Right now, 6 corporations control most of the television, radio, and print publishing networks that Americans see on a daily basis. They drive the debate and the social issues behind the debate. For example, ABC Disney runs ABC News, as well as a large number of local television stations, cable television stations, theme parks, and movie studios. Time Warner owns CNN, TNT, and a whole slew of cable television stations. Warner Brothers Movie Studios, Time Magazine, People, Sports Illustrated, and a large number of magazines. News Corp runs Fox News, a radio news network, 20th Century Fox Movie Studios, and dozens of newspapers and book publishers. NBC Universal is jointly owned by Comcast and General Electric, one of the largest corporations in America. It runs NBC, MSNBC, a large selection of cable channels, Universal theme parks, and digital media. Viacom owns a variety of cable television channels and Paramount Pictures movie studios. CBS Corporation owns CBS television networks, Showtime, a number of cable television stations, and a radio news network. Even the left admits a few corporations control the message most Americans see. What they don't talk about is that these few corporations are associated with each other in the New York-based Council on Foreign Relations, and that they have a tight relationship with government and establishment corporate leadership across the country. The Council on Foreign Relations has only 4,500 members out of a national population of some 300 million, but they boast some of the most powerful media personalities and media corporate leaders in the country. CFR corporate members include News Corp, Google, Time Warner, Verizon, Microsoft, McGraw-Hill, General Electric, Thomson Reuters. And it's not just the corporations that are members of the Council on Foreign Relations. Many of the top media personalities you see on a daily basis are also CFR members. For instance, from NBC anchor Brian Williams, MSNBC anchor Mika Brzezinski, CNBC anchor Maria Bartiromo, as well as former anchor Tom Brokaw and Jonathan Alter, who's an NBC News correspondent and Newsweek magazine writer. Over at CBS, former anchor Dan Rather and current anchor Bob Schieffer are both CFR members. CNN has several anchors who are CFR members. Fareed Zakaria, who used to edit the CFR publication Foreign Affairs, and Aaron Burnett, as well as commentators David Gergen, Jonathan Karl, Jeffrey Toobin. ABC Disney has several anchors who are also CFR members. Former anchor Katie Couric, George Stephanopoulos, Diane Sawyer, as well as commentators Peggy Noonan and George Will. Over at Fox and News Corp, the CEO, Rupert Murdoch, is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. So are commentators Morton Kondracki and Charles Krauthammer. Even movie stars are into the CFR, such as Angelina Jolie, Warren Beatty, George Clooney. And this is just a sample. But it's not just full-time journalists and Hollywood big shots from the CFR that get network airtime. The CFR member anchors call CFR member experts to affirm their positions. CFR President Richard Haas boasted in the 2011 annual report that, quote, CFR has been active on the full range of U.S. foreign policy concerns. Experts published 570 op-eds and articles in the New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, Newsweek, Time, and The Atlantic, among others, and made nearly 500 media appearances on major U.S. and international news networks. CFR experts also testified before Congress 14 times and briefed U.S. and foreign government officials over 400 times. So go ahead, change the channel and pretend you can get a different perspective. In reality, it doesn't matter what channel you flip to. The CFR limits on acceptable debate are evident on every national channel, something that many freedom lovers witnessed with the media ignoring, or later, demeaning Ron Paul in the presidential race. There's no national debate on eliminating all foreign aid, even though some 3/4 of Americans want to do it. Why not? Because it's not on the CFR talking points. There's no debate about bringing America's hundreds of military bases abroad home, even though a clear majority of Americans want it. Why not? Because it's not on the CFR talking points. Imagine if such a concentration of top media personalities were found to be members of the National Rifle Association or the Teamsters Union, both of which have a membership nearly 1,000 times that of the Council on Foreign Relations. Wouldn't there be an outcry about bias or corruption? We also saw the mainstream media coalesce around the idea that we had to bail out the banks in 2008 and 2009. Why was that? The CFR and its members led the people to bail out companies that were headed by their fellow CFR members. CFR corporate membership includes major banks such as Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, Citibank, Bank of America, and it did include AIG until it went bankrupt despite the bailouts. And it's not surprising that they got their bailouts either, since the CFR was holding policy discussions with Treasury Department officials throughout the crisis. They still are. Of course, it's easy to get a phone-in interview from the Treasury Secretary before he heads out to the G20 conference if he's already a member. Indeed, it's not just Geithner who's a member, but just about all past Treasury Secretaries have been members of the Council on Foreign Relations for some 50 years, from Bush's Hank Paulson to Clinton's Lawrence Summers and Robert Rubin, a former CEO of Goldman Sachs. This is true across the spectrum of government. Obama's Secretary of State Hillary Clinton is a member, just as Condi Rice and Colin Powell were under the Bush administration, and Madeleine Albright and Warren Christopher were under the Clinton administration. The point of all this discussion is not to beat up on the Council on Foreign Relations, though its members probably deserve it. It's to point out that our media and our elections are tightly controlled by a handful of well-connected, multi-billion-dollar media corporations, and they were controlled that way long before the Citizens United decision. That's how they've been able to get the bailout deals done at the expense of the middle-class taxpayers, despite protests by the Tea Party and the Occupy movement. In this battle, it's not just a battle between the 99% and the 1%. It's a battle between the 99.999% and the 0.001% who are practiced and very good at robbing the 99.999% through the agency of government authority. But the stranglehold of these 5 or 6 corporations is breaking. The internet started the breakup, but Citizens United broke that media oligopoly wide open. Under Citizens United, people only have to find one millionaire to fund their views, and they can get around the mainstream media with grassroots campaigning, internet ads, or even conventional television advertisements. This happened with Liberty for All Super PAC, which helped guide Ron Paul fan Thomas Massie to a Republican primary win in an open Kentucky congressional district. And Freedom Works Super PAC has shaken up Utah politics with its Retire Hatch campaign to stop TARP bailout Republican Orrin Hatch. A 6-term senator, Hatch never would have had to face a runoff election against Tea Party hero Dan Lillenquist without Freedom Works Super PAC's help. The left implores the nation to repeal Citizens United in order to, quote, take money out of politics, close quote. But the only way to do this is to ban freedom of the press. The New York Times condemned the Citizens United decision when it came out in 2009, complaining that corporations should not be involved in politics. This was just days after the Times' corporate subsidiary, the Boston Globe, had endorsed the Democrat in the Massachusetts U.S. Senate race to replace the late Tate Kennedy. No corporations involved in politics? Except themselves. As James Madison noted in Federalist No. 10, political disagreements can be decided by either government censorship or allowing everyone to broadcast their views and trusting the people to make the right decisions at the ballot box. He chose the latter. As the former, he described as destroying the liberty which is essential to its existence. He also described it as folly. Destroying the essential liberty is precisely what the critics of Citizens United want to do. The attitude of the Repeal Citizens United crowd can be summed up accurately as totalitarian paternalism. They don't trust the people to come to the right conclusions. The people must be safely shepherded by the guardians of acceptable opinion as represented by the 5 or 6 giant corporations that run the establishment media. Or perhaps they remain blissfully unaware that repealing Citizens United would put the same old establishment back in charge. In the end, it is an attitude of censorship worthy of Joseph Stalin. More importantly, it's flatly contradictory to the First and 10th Amendments to the United States Constitution. The cry on the left is that corporations are not people. That's true. Corporations and super PACs are associations of people. And this, too, was part of the First Amendment, which protected the right of the people to assemble and associate. During the congressional debate on the Bill of Rights in 1789, Connecticut Congressman Theodore Sedgwick opposed the First Amendment because he thought adding freedom of assembly to freedom of speech and press was redundant. According to the Annals of Congress, the official record of congressional debate, Sedgwick, quote, feared it would tend to make them appear trifling in the eyes of their constituents. What, said he, shall we secure the freedom of speech and think it necessary at the same time to allow the right of assembling? If people freely converse together, they must assemble for that purpose. It is a self-evident, unalienable right which people possess, and it is certainly a thing that never would be called into question. It is derogatory to the dignity of the House to descend to such minutiae, and yet that is what the Citizens United crowd wants to do. Along with freedom of the press must come those who can own presses. The right to band together for a political cause and spend money was well entrenched in the American constitutional system by the 1830s, when Alexis de Tocqueville noted in his Democracy in America that, quote, "In no country in the world has the principle of association been more successfully used or applied to a greater magnitude of objects than in America. Besides the permanent associations, which are established by law under the names of townships, cities, and counties, a vast number of others are formed and maintained by the agency of private individuals. An association consists simply in the public assent which a number of individuals give to certain doctrines, and in the engagement which they contract to promote in a certain manner the spread of those doctrines. The right of associating in this fashion almost merges with freedom of the press, but societies thus formed possess more authority than the press. While the left demonizes the label corporations, it's nothing more than a label. A boogeyman. Call them associations of Americans exercising their rights to freedom of the press and freedom of speech, and the boogeyman is banished. The Citizens United decision allows more speech, not less. And for that reason, the Founding Fathers were probably smiling down from heaven when the decision was released. For Liberty News Network, I'm Tom Eddlem reporting.